Welcome back to part 2 of our series where we are demonstrating how to take a list object inside of an Excel workbook and import that table into an Access database. In our previous video, we walked through the initial portion of the code and then also just gave a high-level overview about kind of what the project is, what's our goal, and all that kind of fun stuff. But for the most part, we didn't do anything super fancy. The only real thing we did was basically give ourselves a method for identifying whether the table already existed in our database. And if it didn't, then going through the process of, or at least the initial steps of the process of creating that table. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to finish up the process of creating the table, because right now we have a table definition, but we don't have any fields in our table. So basically we got a blank table with no columns. But additionally, when we go through the process of creating those columns, we're going to also see how we can have the data types match up to what we are seeing inside of the Excel table. Now we have to be a little bit cautious with this because, again, we're making some assumptions behind the scenes. So we'll talk about that when we get there. But that's at least what we have planned for this video. So let's get started. Okay, we're back. All right. Sorry, I have to readjust myself because when you're coding, you have to move a lot. All right, so let's go back to our editor like we did before. We left off here where if the table was not found, we're going to create a new table definition. Now, if you remember a few videos ago, if you want to add a table definition to the table definition, so the collection, you have to have fields in that table. So right now, we need to take it a little bit more, which is we need to now go through the process of actually creating the fields inside of that table. So I'm going to do a couple things and, kind of looking back at this, there's different ways of doing this, but right now I'm kind of thinking about maybe not even including this line, but I'll just leave it in there for right now. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to loop through each column inside of my list object. So I want to go left to right, and I want to get some pieces of information from those columns, things like its name, things like its data type. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through each of the columns in my table. I'm going to be very explicit here, my Excel table. So I'm going to say for each Excel data column in Excel data table dot list columns next. So what am I going to do with each column? Well, the first thing is we need to see, well, technically, no, we don't need to do this portion if we're assuming that it's there. We'll do this. I'll do this. We're going to say print out some info for the user. Basically what we're doing here, and again, I just want to kind of be clear, we're making the assumption that the table does not exist. So if we assume it doesn't exist, we're also making the assumption that because it doesn't exist, clearly the fields would not exist, right? So what we're going to be saying is, okay, debug print, and then we're going to say column field. Did I spell that right? No, field. And then I'm going to do plus Excel data column dot name is going to be created. Okay, and then additionally, we're going to have another thing down here that will print out what the data type is going to be. So column field data type will be, and then, oh, sorry, I forgot to put my other plus sign here. I did that up there, right? Okay, perfect. So the other thing I'm going to do is we're going to print out what the data type is. Now I have a, I have a function that I found on Stack Overflow that I'm going to just walk you through. I'm not going to type it out again, just because I think once you look at it, it's pretty intuitive what's going on. So the name of this function is called cell type. It's going to have one argument, p range, and that's going to be an Excel range. Now, you got to be careful with this. You got to make sure that you actually do pass through an Excel range, because you can't pass through a value or you're going to get an error. And then we do a select statement. So we select the case where it's true. And we basically check the data type of that particular cell value, or at least the range. So the first one is VBA is empty. The next one is the Excel.application is text, is logical, is error, is date, in string, what is it? If something like that, it's if it's a time, for example, and if it's numeric. So all this is going to do is it's going to try to infer the data type of the entire column. Okay, so that's really important to know. Again, it's not going to do something like, oh, well, hey, here you have a number and then here you have a text, right? It's not going to do anything that fancy. Again, I'm being very explicit about how I'm kind of writing it, but all I'm doing here is this is going to check to see what the data type of the range is, at least the first cell of that range. So it's going to use basically the first row to determine the data type of that particular column. And then based on that, it's going to return the database equivalent. So if it's a text in Excel, then we're going to say it's a database text data type. If it's a logical type in Excel, then it's a database Boolean type. If it's an error or if it's empty, guess what? It's going to be null. If it's a date, it's going to be a database date, and so on and so on. So all this is going to do is return the database type. So that's all that's going to be doing. So all this is going to do is it's just going to print out and tell them what the data type is going to be. So in this situation, we're going to say, where did I put myself? Convert to string. And then I'm going to do cell type. And then it's going to be Excel data column. And then we're going to do the data body range. I'm going to go to the item. And then I'm going to do just basically the first row. Just like that. So, my apologies, I think I left off one. Perfect. So let's see what this looks like. The first thing I'm going to have to do, though, is I'm going to have to actually delete my table. So here we go. Delete it. Oh, sorry, I need to close it first. Delete it. Yes. Okay, so you can see here that it is returning the information back to us. So it looks like the new table was, well, it was created, but it wasn't appended to anything. So if I run this again, this time I would actually not get an error because we never officially appended it to the table definitions collection. So again, all this is going to be doing is just simply letting us know if the table wasn't created, it's going to create a new table definition, and then we're going to loop through each column inside of that data table, and we're going to start adding a field for each column. So what we're going to do is we're going to say with the access import table. Oh, I don't know why I put the end with. And then from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say add the field. And then from here, I'm going to say dot fields. I'm going to do append, and then I'm going to do create field. So to the fields collection, append a new field. So I call the create field method. I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to give my field a name. I'm going to give the name so it matches what's in the Excel file. And then I'm going to say the type is going to be, and then basically I'm just going to copy this little thing right here. Copy this and then put that there. Did I misspell something? Oh, it's probably because I need another one right there. So all that's going to do is it's going to add a new field to our table. So take the access table, add the field to it, at least to the collection. Now, remember, you can only add a table definition to the table definitions collection if it has fields in it. So then from here, once I've looped through everything, down near the bottom, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that particular table to the collection. So I'm going to say add to the table definitions collection. So I'm then going to take my access database, that particular object. I know there's a tables definitions collection. I know it has an append method, and then I can just pass through the object that I want to append to it. In that case, I just want to do the access import table with the fields included. Now, after I've added it, what's the one thing we have to do in Access to see it? We have to add it, or we have to refresh the database window. So in this situation, refresh the window. So access, and then I'll do app, and then we'll do refresh database window. Let's see what this does. Okay, that's a good sign. Looks like everything so far was working. We now have a table with 3 columns. They match the names that we see inside of our Excel workbook, so that's good. It seems like it was working at least in that regard. Let's look at the fields. Looks like this one, short text, so that's good, short text. Well, this one kind of sucks because they're all short text, but the important thing is we want to make sure it's matching up exactly with what we're seeing there. So that's encouraging. I'm coming out, relatively confident. Now, the couple things you're gonna have to keep in mind is, there's different text types inside of Access. So you can't assume that just because it's text that it's gonna all necessarily fill into it. So, just be aware of that when, you're using this code. Is like, again, I'm making assumptions about the data. It doesn't mean you can't adjust it. You just have to make sure that, you understand kind of when you adjust it, what is that doing to the actual fields itself. So I'm going to do that. And then in this situation, I can move on to the next component, which is I'm going to open up a new record set. And then with that record set, I'm going to start adding rows to it. So I'm going to say, once we add the table, we will open up a new record set to add the data. So I'm going to set my access record equal to my access database. There is an open record set method, and then I just need to give the name of the record set that I want to open. It can actually be a data table. So I can actually do lots of different things. In this situation, I'm just going to say open up the snake database table. So this might confuse people a little bit, like, oh, you're using your list object name to open the new record set, so you must be opening that one in Excel, right? No, I'm actually opening the one that's in Access. It's just that they both have the same names. So to make sure I'm opening up the right table, I know when I created it, I gave the same name as the list object name. So that's why I'm using the Excel data table name. It's because I know when I created it that that was the one I was using. Once I've opened it up, I'm going to loop through each row in my Excel data table. So loop through each row in my Excel data table. So I'm going to say for each Excel data row in Excel data table, there's a list rows collection. And then I'm going to do next. And then I'm going to start an incrementer. So define item count. I'm going to say item count equals 1. Then from here, I'm going to use the add new method to add a new record. So I'm going to say access record dot add new. And then from here, I'm going to do for each item header in Excel data table. And then I'm going to do the header row range. And then I'm going to do next. Again, this will make a little bit more sense when we get to the part that tends to confuse people. So loop through the header row. Once I've done that, I'm going to indent again. I'm going to grab the field name. This is going to represent the item header dot value. And then I'm going to grab the field value. This will equal the Excel data row. And then I'm going to do the range property. I'm going to do the item property. And then I'm going to pass through the row, or in this case, kind of the column index, which is going to be the item count. And then I just want that value. So when we add a new record to a particular, to a record set, we have to specify the field and the value that we want associated with that field. So the way I do this is because, again, when I created each field in the table, I simply gave it the column name from my Excel table. So for example, I have a snake name field, address, and hyperlink, right? So when I'm adding a new record to it, I have to specify the field name. So that's why I'm looping through the header row range, is because I need to make sure I constantly have my header row values. So that way, when I add the field, I know which field I'm adding it to. So that's why I'm doing this part. So all I'm doing here is grab the field name, grab the field value, something like that. So once I've done that, I'm going to do a couple things, which is if field value equals this, else, and then end if. If we have a blank string, then we have to make sure it's a null value. So specify that the value is null. This is a little bit tricky because you can have a blank string. That doesn't mean it's necessarily null, but we're going to reflect it as null inside of our database. So I'm going to specify that the value is null. So I'm going to say access record, and then I'm going to do the field name is going to equal, or sorry, the field name dot value is going to equal null. And really, I can kind of take this exact same thing and I can just put it right down below and specify that, hey, if it's not null, add it to the field record. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to do field value. I'm going to do that. And then from here, I'm going to update my item count. So I'm going to say item count equals item count plus 1. Okay, so that's all good. And then finally, what I'm going to do is once I've done that, I need to make sure I update my record. So I'm going to say update the record set. And I'm going to say access record dot, or not updatable, update. Perfect. And then from there, that actually is the end of it. So we're going to test it out. There's a couple of things I'm going to do. I guess what I'll do is I'll just run it as is just to validate some stuff. Okay, I already got my first thing. Oh. It's always something, right? So it might take a few seconds, obviously, depending on how many rows you're going through. There's different ways of doing this. Again, you could create a master array. It'd probably be a little bit faster, but let's see what we get when we did this. So looks like it worked fine. Looks like everything was added. Looks like all the hyperlinks were added. So that's actually a good sign. I mean, I think coming out of this, it looks like everything is looking pretty good. So I would definitely say it looks like it worked as expected. So it imported each column, it gave everything the correct data type, and it seems like every single record is in here because there's one of 618 records. There's 619, so just minus the headers and you're good to go. But looks like it worked successfully and everything's matching up nicely. And we have success. We have success, people. My God. Life can go on. Alrighty, so at this point, that does end the video. If you have any final questions about just the overall logic of the code, if you have suggestions maybe to improve it, make it a little bit faster, or just, I guess, more intuitive, I'm always open to hearing that. Actually, it's really interesting to hear people's perspectives on how to write code because, I'm just one person, and I have talked to enough people now to like just see different ways of thinking, and people come up with some pretty interesting stuff. So, if you have suggestions, by all means, put them down. And then also, if you are new to the channel, a couple things. Make sure to follow me on Facebook, because that is where I am posting this database. So if you want to have access to the database and the code, make sure to follow me on Facebook. And I have a Facebook group where I post the files that I use. I also have a GitHub page where I post just the code. So I won't usually post the workbooks if it's like VBA and stuff like that. So you want to make sure you follow me there as well, because that one I have, God knows how many repos now. I'm losing count, but there's a ton of repos. So make sure to follow me there. And then also, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. We always love having new members to the community. It's always fun. And then if you have suggestions, again, feel free to put that down below. But I would say probably for the next VBA series regarding access, we're probably going to just go through some more concepts, maybe like building more complex queries, maybe doing things like building reports. That could be interesting. We'll also probably go through some, I call it like administrative stuff, just going through and like doing like formatting stuff, cleaning up tables, organizing objects and things like that. And then just walking through different things to mimic like interacting with the user interface, things like that. Only because I think if once you have that kind of skill set down, it's usually a lot more easier to work with certain applications. But that's what I would say, at least for our Access VBA series, we'll start doing. I do have some more Win32com stuff as well. That one we're going to be covering parsing Office documents, so that's going to be fun for some of you. And then also we have the trading system series as well. So we're going to kick off the data factory one, I think, probably next, just because that one's going to cover a lot of different topics and all that kind of fun stuff. It's going to be probably confusing both for you and me. So thank you again for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next series.